The night Lord Ashford met Miss Cecily Wren, her brother described her as a distant cousin, fallen on hard times, grateful for any kindness. 3 things in that sentence were lies. Cecily counted them as Edmund spoke, standing at his elbow in the drawing room of Ashford House with her hands folded, and her face arranged into the particular expression she had perfected over 23 years of being Edmund Wren's sister. Attentive, agreeable, quietly, invisibly elsewhere. Edmund was very good at this. He had always been very good at this, the warm voice, the self-deprecating pause, the way he made generosity toward someone else sound like a compliment to the person he was asking it of. Cecily had watched him do it her entire life. She no longer found it impressive. She found it, if anything, useful, because a man performing charm was a man not paying attention to what the person beside him was actually doing. She looked at the Duke of Ashford across the drawing room. He was not looking at Edmund, he was looking at her. Ah, thought Cecily, so it's going to be that kind of evening. She had planned for several kinds. She had not, she realized, planned quite carefully enough for this one. She had chosen the dress herself. Edmund had sent 3 alternatives, all of them carefully, deliberately wrong, the kind of wrong that looked like an honest mistake and wasn't. Too fine and she would seem presumptuous. Too shabby and she would seem pathetic. Edmund needed her to seem grateful, just comfortable enough to be presentable, just diminished enough to be manageable. Cecily had looked at his 3 alternatives and then gone to her trunk and found something he had never seen. It was gray, quiet, entirely respectable. It said nothing in particular about money in either direction, which meant it said everything she intended. Edmund had looked at it when she came downstairs and she had watched him decide, in the space of 2 seconds, that it was fine, that he couldn't object without explaining why he was objecting, and explaining why he was objecting would require a conversation he didn't want to have in the carriage on the way to Ashford. He had offered her his arm instead. She had taken it. Round 1, she had thought, to no one in particular. Ashford House was larger than she had expected and better kept than Edmund had implied, which told her something. Edmund's descriptions of places tended toward the useful. He made things sound a little worse than they were when he wanted her to feel lucky, a little better when he wanted her to feel intimidated. He had described Ashford as comfortable, if you like that sort of thing, which meant it was either very grand or very welcoming, and she had prepared for both. It was both. The housekeeper met them at the door, a capable-looking woman in her 50s who assessed Cecily in approximately 3 seconds with the efficient attention of someone who had been reading guests accurately for decades. Whatever she concluded, she gave no indication of it. Simply took their coats and directed them toward the drawing room with the smooth competence of a well-run house. Cecily noticed the flowers in the hall. Fresh, well-chosen, not extravagant, just right. Someone in this house had taste and was not performing it. She filed it away. The drawing room held perhaps 20 people, neighbors, she gathered, local families, the comfortable circuit of a duke's social life in the country. The kind of gathering that looked informal and wasn't. Everyone knew everyone and had known everyone for years, and the presence of strangers was noted, catalogued, and discussed in glances before the strangers had crossed the threshold. Cecily felt 20 pairs of eyes move to her as she entered. She kept her expression pleasant, her posture easy, her hands still. Edmund steered her toward the center of the room with the practiced confidence of a man presenting something he was proud of, which was, she thought, precisely the problem with Edmund. He was proud of her. He had always been proud of her. In the specific, proprietary way a man is proud of a possession that reflects well on him. It had taken her an embarrassingly long time to understand the difference between that and something else. Ashford, Edmund said, and the room shifted slightly, the particular shift of a room rearranging itself around its host. Allow me, my sister, Miss Cecily Wren. Cecily, the Duke of Ashford. He had not said poor relation yet. He was saving it. He would work it in, he always did, always in the second or third sentence, always with a small, rueful smile that made it seem like a confidence shared between gentlemen rather than a knife placed quietly between someone's ribs. Cecily turned to face the Duke of Ashford. She registered this in the same efficient, uninvested way she registered all useful information, somewhat younger than she had expected. Somewhere in his mid-30s. Dark coat, no jewelry, the kind of physical ease that came from a man comfortable enough in his own life that he had stopped thinking about how he appeared in it. He was also, she noticed immediately, not doing the thing people usually did when Edmund introduced her. The thing people usually did was look at her and then look at Edmund and perform a small calculation, poor relation, grateful for kindness, be pleasant, but don't make too much of it, and arrange their faces accordingly. It happened within the first 3 seconds, reliably, every time. The Duke of Ashford looked at her and did not do the calculation. He simply looked at her directly, without the social machinery running behind his eyes, and said, "Miss Wren, welcome to Ashford." "Thank you," Cecily said. "It's a beautiful house." "It has its virtues," he said. And then, and this was the part she had not prepared for, "Have you been to this part of the county before?" Not "How long have you been with your brother?" or "Edmund tells me you've had a difficult time of it," or any of the careful, managed questions people asked when they had already been told what to think of her. Just, "Have you been here before?" A real question. The kind you asked someone you were actually curious about. "Once," she said, "when I was 12, my father brought me." "What did you think of it then?" "I thought the grounds were extraordinary. I still do, from what I saw on the way in." Something shifted in his expression, a small movement of interest, genuine rather than performed. Edmund touched her elbow. "Cecily has always had a good eye," he said smoothly, stepping into the conversation with the particular skill of a man who has noticed it going somewhere he didn't plan for. "Though I'm afraid she hasn't had much opportunity to exercise it lately. It's been rather a difficult few years. We're very grateful for your hospitality, Ashford, very grateful indeed." There it was, third sentence, right on schedule. Cecily kept her expression pleasant. The Duke looked at Edmund with the brief, polite acknowledgement of a man receiving information he has already set aside, and then he looked back at Cecily. "The East Gardens are open tomorrow morning if you'd like to see them properly," he said. "Mrs. Holt will know the best time." "I'd like that very much," Cecily said. Edmund's hand on her elbow tightened very slightly. She did not look at him. The evening went on. She was passed from group to group in the way of these evenings, pleasant conversation, careful questions, the social performance of a woman who was exactly what her brother had described. She was good at it. She had been good at it since she was 16, which was when she had first understood that the most useful thing in a room full of people watching you was to give them precisely what they expected and keep everything else entirely to yourself. She watched Edmund work the room. She watched him charm the neighboring gentleman. She watched him compliment the lady beside him on her brooch with exactly the right mixture of admiration and knowledge. She watched him laugh, that warm, easy laugh, and saw the room lean toward it the way rooms always did with Edmund, pulled in by the gravity of a man who made everyone feel, briefly, that they were the most interesting person he had ever met. She had felt that once, a long time ago. She watched him and she watched the Duke, and she noticed that the Duke watched Edmund too, not with suspicion, not yet, but with the quiet attention of a man storing information. Perceptive, she thought. Good. She had been counting on the Duke being perceptive. It was a necessary part of the plan. What she had not been counting on was finding him, interesting. That was inconvenient. She made a small note of it and put it away. She was standing near the window at 9:30, studying the darkness of the East Gardens and calculating timelines, when she heard him beside her. "You don't look like someone fallen on hard times," the Duke said. She turned. He was standing close enough for the words to be private, not inappropriately close, just close enough. His expression was not accusatory. It was simply observant, the statement of a man who had been thinking something and had decided, reasonably, to say it. Cecily looked at him for a moment. "Don't I?" she said. "No," he said, "you don't." She held his gaze for exactly long enough, then she turned back to the window. "The east gardens," she said. "Are those the ones with the walled section? I thought I saw a wall from the drive." A pause. "Yes," he said. "The roses are dormant now, but in spring." "I look forward to seeing them," she said pleasantly, and turned toward the room and left him at the window. Behind her, she heard Edmund say something charming to someone across the room and the comfortable laughter that followed. She walked to the other side of the drawing room and accepted a cup of tea she didn't want and told herself, firmly, that inconvenient was not the same as impossible. She was still telling herself that when the carriage home turned out of the Ashford Drive and Edmund said, very quietly in the dark beside her, "Behave yourself, Cecily." She looked out the window at the passing dark. "Always," she said, and she went back to counting. The letter arrived on Thursday. Cecily found it because she was meant to find it. Edmund had left it on the desk in the study he was using, open, weighted with an inkwell, at an angle that suggested carelessness and wasn't. Edmund was never careless with documents. He was careful with them the way a card player is careful with his hand, not hiding it exactly, just never letting you see more than he wanted you to see. This one he wanted her to see. She read it standing without touching it, which was a habit she had developed 8 months ago when she first began to understand what Edmund had been doing and realized that the difference between evidence and knowledge was whether you could prove you'd seen it. It was from Mr. Holt, Edmund's solicitor. The settlement terms are prepared as discussed. The Duke's signature is required by the end of the month. I would advise moving quickly. The land valuation holds until the 30th, after which the northern parcel may require reassessment. If Miss Wren can be brought to sign the proxy by Friday, Cecily stopped reading. Not because she was surprised. She was not surprised. She had known about the settlement for 6 weeks, had found the earlier drafts in Edmund's correspondence, had understood the shape of it before she'd ever set foot in Ashford House. Edmund wanted the Duke's northern parcel. The Duke's northern parcel bordered the Wren estate on 2 sides, and if Edmund could acquire it through a marriage settlement he controlled, it would complete the enclosure of the eastern farmland he'd been quietly selling off for 3 years. She had known all of this. What she had not known until this moment was that Edmund intended to have her sign the proxy by Friday. Today was Wednesday. She straightened up, walked to the window, looked out at the garden of the rented house Edmund had taken for the month, smaller than Ashford, considerably smaller than the Wren estate had been before Edmund began his work on it, with a view of a wall and a kitchen garden that nobody was tending properly. She thought about Friday. She thought about Thomas. Thomas had been with the Wren household since Cecily was 11 years old. He had started as a hall boy and become, over 15 years, the kind of steady, entirely reliable presence that a house either takes for granted or comes to depend on completely. Cecily had come to depend on him completely, which was why Edmund had made him his own footman 4 years ago, close enough to be useful, controlled enough to be harmless. What Edmund had not accounted for was that Thomas had been loyal to Cecily for 15 years, and loyalty of that duration is not a thing that transfers with a change of employment. Thomas had been her eyes inside Edmund's household for 8 months. He copied correspondence. He noted meetings. He passed her information in the margins of laundry lists and inside the lining of coat pockets, and once memorably, in the hollow of a bread roll that he had presented at breakfast with an expression of perfect professional neutrality. She had eaten the roll. She had palmed the paper. Edmund had been sitting across the table and had not noticed. It was Thomas who had told her about the solicitor's visit last month. It was Thomas who had confirmed the existence of the settlement documents. It was Thomas who had slipped the note under her door at 11 o'clock last night, 3 words in his cramped, careful hand. Friday. Be careful. She went back to her room and sat at the small desk by the window and thought. The plan she had been building for 8 months, the careful, patient, evidence-first plan required time. It required the solicitor's records, which she was still waiting on. It required the signed statements from 2 of the estate tenants who had been pressured into selling, which were being prepared by a solicitor in Gloucester whom Edmund did not know existed. It required, most critically, the original trust document from their father's estate, which Edmund had told her for 4 years was with the family solicitor, and which she had discovered 3 months ago was not with the family solicitor and was not anywhere she had yet been able to find it. The plan required approximately 3 more weeks. She had 2 days. She thought about this for a while. Then she thought about the Duke's question. You don't look like someone fallen on hard times. She had deflected it, cleanly, she thought, without appearing to deflect it, which was the best kind of deflection. She had turned it into a conversation about gardens and walked away before it could become anything else. But she had felt it, underneath the deflection. The small, inconvenient weight of being correctly seen. She had not been correctly seen by anyone in a long time. She had been managed, assessed, accommodated, and pitied, and she had worked very hard to make sure that anyone who looked at her saw exactly what she intended them to see. The Duke of Ashford had looked at her for approximately 4 minutes and drawn a conclusion she had not given him permission to draw. That was, she thought, either a serious problem or a serious opportunity. She was beginning to think it was both. She changed into her walking dress and went to find the East Gardens. Mrs. Holt, the Ashford housekeeper, whose name she had remembered precisely because Edmund had mentioned the solicitor of the same name, and she made a point of noting potential confusions before they caused her trouble, told her the gardens were best in the morning but that the walled section was open whenever she liked. Cecily went. The wall was old, red brick, built when someone had decided that certain things deserved protection from the wind. Inside it was quiet in the way of enclosed spaces, not silence exactly, but the particular hush of somewhere that had held seasons in it for long enough that the air itself felt different. The roses were cut back for winter, bare canes tied carefully to the trellises, the beds mulched and waiting. She walked slowly. She was not precisely thinking about the roses. She was thinking about proxies and Fridays and the distance between what she needed and what she had. What is it you actually need, Miss Wren? She stopped walking. She had not thought about that moment again since it happened, had deliberately not thought about it, which was itself a kind of thinking about it. The question had been direct in a way that direct questions almost never were, which was to say it had been aimed somewhere real rather than somewhere polite, and had arrived accordingly. What is it you actually need? The answer she had not given was, the estate, the documents, 8 more months and I can do this without anyone's help. The answer she had not let herself examine was the one underneath that. You came early, she turned. The Duke was at the gate, in a coat that had seen outdoor work and boots that confirmed it, with the look of a man who had been up since before the house was fully awake. He did not appear surprised to find her here. He appeared, if anything, as though he had half expected it. You said the morning was best, she said. It is. He came through the gate and stopped a comfortable distance away, looking at the rose beds with the familiar ease of someone who had walked this path many times. They'll be extraordinary in May. My grandmother planted the original stock. You kept her design. There didn't seem to be any reason to change it. He said it simply, without sentiment, and it told her something about the kind of man who looked at what he had inherited and asked whether it needed changing rather than assuming the answer was yes. She filed it away. She was running out of room, she thought, for things she was filing away about him. They walked for a moment without speaking. She noticed he did not fill silences for the sake of filling them, which was rarer than it should have been. "Mr. Wren tells me you've been with him for the past 2 years," the Duke said. "Has he?" "He mentioned it last night after you went in, that you'd had difficulty after your father died, that he'd taken you in." The phrasing was Edmund's. She could hear it, "taken you in," the particular construction that made generosity of a man managing his own assets. "Edmund has been very attentive," she said, "since father died." "Your father's estate is in trust," she said. "Edmund manages it. He's been very thorough." She kept her voice perfectly neutral. She watched the Duke receive this, watched him hear the words and hear, underneath the words, the thing she was not saying and decide what to do with the gap between them. He looked at her. "Miss Wren," he said, "if there is something you need to tell me about your brother, about the reason you're here, I would rather hear it from you." It was, she thought, extraordinary. She had been here less than 48 hours and he was already at the door of it, asking her to open it. Part of her wanted to. That was the inconvenient part, the part she had been filing away and running out of room for. The other part of her knew that she could not open that door yet. Not without the documents, not without the statements from Gloucester, not without something more than her word against Edmunds, because her word against Edmunds was a fight she had already tried to have and already lost. "I think," she said carefully, "that there are things which will become clear in time." He studied her for a moment. "How much time?" "Not very much," she said. "I hope." He nodded, slowly. The nod of a man accepting terms he finds inadequate but recognizes are the best currently on offer. They walked the rest of the walled garden in silence. It was, she thought, a remarkably comfortable silence for two people who did not yet know each other at all. That was, she decided, the most inconvenient thing of all. Thomas found her at noon. She was in the small sitting room Edmund had designated as hers, a room with good light and a view of the drive, which she had chosen for the view of the drive, and he came in with the tea tray and set it down and did not leave. She waited until the door was closed. "Friday," she said. "Tonight, miss." His voice was very low. He moved it. "Mr. Holt is coming tonight." Cecily set down her cup. "Tonight," she repeated. "After dinner. He told me to make sure you retired early, said you'd been tired from the journey." She was quiet for a moment. Edmund was good. She had always known Edmund was good. But there was a difference between knowing someone was capable and watching them move faster than you had calculated, and that difference had a particular quality to it, cold, focused, clarifying. "The documents from Gloucester," she said. "How long?" "A week at least, miss, maybe more." "And the original trust document, any word?" Thomas hesitated, just slightly. "Thomas, I think I know where it is," he said. "I think he has it with him, here, in the case he keeps locked." Cecily looked at him. "You think?" "I've seen him take something from it twice, and put it back quickly when he heard me coming. The dimensions would be right for." "Don't," she said. "Don't go near it if he finds you." "I know. Promise me." Thomas looked at her. He had been with the Wren household for 15 years, and he had the look now of a man who had made a decision some months ago about which side of a line he was standing on and was entirely at peace with it. "I promise," he said. She nodded. After he left, she sat for a long time looking at the drive. She thought about tonight, about Edmund and Mr. Holt and a proxy she was not going to sign. She thought about how many ways she could refuse and how many of those ways Edmund could manage and what would happen after tonight, when he understood that she was not going to cooperate. She thought about a locked case and a document she needed, and a promise she had just extracted from the one person she could not afford to lose. Then she thought about the Duke. She thought about how much time, and not very much, I hope, and the particular, careful patience of a man who had decided to wait when he didn't have to. She picked up her pen. She wrote a note, short, no salutation, the kind of note that could be from anyone to anyone if Edmund found it. The East Garden, 6 o'clock. She folded it. She would decide, she told herself on the walk over, exactly how much to say. She was fairly certain, by the time she reached the gate at 6 o'clock and found him already there, that she had been deciding since the moment she arrived. He was there before her. She had half expected, if she was honest, that he would not come at all, that the note would seem too strange or too presumptuous or simply too much, and that she would stand at the gate of the walled garden at 6 o'clock feeling like a woman who had miscalculated badly. He was standing at the far end of the garden with his hands behind his back, looking at the dormant roses in the low winter light, and he turned when he heard the gate and looked at her with the expression she was beginning to recognize, that direct, unperformed attention that kept catching her unprepared. "Miss Wren," he said. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I was curious," he said simply, and waited. She had rehearsed 3 versions of this conversation on the walk over. The first was careful, give him one piece, the smallest piece, enough to establish that she was not what Edmund had described without giving him anything he could act on prematurely. Keep it controlled. Keep it managed. The second was slightly less careful, 2 pieces, the estate and the trust, enough to make him understand the shape of things without the specifics that required documentation. The third she had dismissed almost immediately because it involved telling him everything, and she had not told anyone everything in 8 months, and was not about to start in a walled garden at dusk with a man she had known for 48 hours. She had arrived at the gate intending the first version. She looked at him standing in the low light with the winter roses behind him, and the patience of a man who had decided not to fill the silence, and she said, "My brother did not describe me accurately." "No," the Duke said, "I didn't think he had. I am not a poor relation. I am not fallen on hard times. I have never been dependent on Edmund's generosity." She kept her voice even. "My father left his estate to me directly. I have been the primary beneficiary of the Wren Trust since I was 19 years old." The Duke was very still. "Edmund is trustee," she continued. "He was appointed because I was 19 and my father believed, reasonably, at the time, that I would benefit from guidance during the transition." She paused. "My father died before he had the opportunity to observe what that guidance would look like in practice." She stopped. That was the first piece, the smallest piece. She had given it cleanly and it was out now in the cold air between them, and she watched him receive it. He was quiet for a moment. "How long?" he said. 4 years. "Has anyone else?" "No," she said. "No one who could do anything useful." He nodded, not the nod of a man performing sympathy, the nod of a man processing information, organizing it, placing it alongside other things he had already noted. "The settlement," he said. She looked at him. "Edmund has spoken to my solicitor," he said. "Twice in the last month. He mentioned a possible arrangement, land, adjacent parcels, terms to be discussed." He paused. "I didn't pursue it. Something about the approach felt," he considered, "premature." "Edmund tends to work quickly," Cecily said. "Yes," said the Duke, "I've noticed." She looked at him, at the careful, organized way he was putting this together, the pieces she had given, and the pieces he had already gathered himself, and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not relief exactly, something more cautious than relief. The tentative, almost suspicious recognition that she was not, at this particular moment, entirely alone in the room. She had been alone in the room for 4 years. She did not trust the feeling, but she noted it. "Can I ask you something?" the Duke said. "You can ask," she said. "I may not answer." Fair, he looked at her directly. You came here on purpose, didn't you? She held his gaze. Edmund brought me, she said. Edmund brought you because he needed you here. But you agreed to come, and I don't think you're a woman who agrees to things she hasn't already decided are useful. He paused. So, you came here on purpose. The garden was very quiet. Yes, she said. What did you need from here? She looked away for a moment at the rose beds, the careful tied canes, the wall that kept the wind out. Someone had built that wall because they understood that certain things needed protection to grow. She had always liked that about enclosed gardens. Time, she said finally. The situation at home has been accelerating. I needed to be here where I could see what he was doing while I waited for certain processes to complete. What processes? Documentation, she said. Evidence. The kind of thing that makes a difference in front of a solicitor. You're building a case. I have been building a case, she said, for 8 months. He was quiet for a moment. She watched him decide something. She could see it, the small movement of resolution crossing his face. How can I help? He said. She blinked. She had not expected that. She had expected questions, more questions, careful questions, the kind that established what he stood to gain or lose before committing to anything. She had prepared for that. She had not prepared for 3 words delivered with the straightforward simplicity of a man who had already made up his mind. You don't know enough yet, she said. No, he agreed, but I know enough to know which direction things are pointing. A pause. And I know what Edmund wants from this house. He's been laying groundwork with my solicitor for weeks. Whatever he's arranged, I haven't agreed to it, but I'd like to understand what it actually is before he presents me with something signed. He'll present it tonight, Cecily said. The Duke looked at her. His solicitor is coming after dinner, she said. I was supposed to retire early. Edmund intended to, she stopped. There's a proxy document for the settlement. He wants my signature on it before you've been given the full terms. Why? Because the full terms, she said, include provisions for the Wren estate that have nothing to do with the land adjacent to yours. The estate has been managed in ways that require the settlement to go through before anyone examines the accounts too carefully. She said it plainly. It was the second piece, larger than she'd intended to give tonight, larger than the first version of this conversation had included, and she felt the giving of it the way you feel any significant thing leaving your hands. Not regret, just wait. The Duke was quiet for a long moment. The estate is being stripped, he said. Systematically, Cecily said, yes. And the settlement would cover it, provide enough incoming capital that the outgoing wouldn't be visible for another several years, by which time Edmund would have what he needed and I would have. She stopped. Nothing, the Duke said quietly. I was going to say very little, Cecily said, but yes, essentially. The word sat in the cold air. She had not said it aloud before, not to anyone. She had thought it, had known it, had organized her entire life for 8 months around preventing it. But she had not said it to another person's face and heard the plainness of it. Nothing. She kept her expression still. The Duke looked at the gate. Go back to the house, he said. Have dinner, retire early exactly as Edmund expects. She looked at him. Mr. Holt will arrive, he said, and Edmund will present whatever he has prepared, and I will listen to all of it very carefully. He paused. And I will not sign anything. He'll find another way. He will try, the Duke said. But there is a difference between trying and succeeding, and Edmund's efforts in that direction have so far relied on my not knowing what I now know. He said it simply, without drama. The statement of a man who had made a decision and had no particular need to perform it. Cecily looked at him for a moment. You should know, she said, that I came here with my own intentions. That I am not simply a person this is happening to. I had a plan. I was using the situation deliberately. I know, he said. I wanted you to know that I told you. I know that too. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Miss Wren, I've spent the last 2 days noticing that you are approximately 3 steps ahead of everyone in every room you enter. The idea that you arrived here without a plan did not seriously occur to me. She looked at him. She did not know quite what to do with that, with being seen that clearly, that matter-of-factly, without it being used for anything. People who noticed things about Cecily Wren usually did something with what they noticed. Edmund did. Even people who meant well turned it into advice or concern or management. The Duke had noticed and simply said it, as a fact, as something he found, if anything, straightforward. You should go in, he said, before Edmund notices you've been out. She turned toward the gate. Miss Wren, she stopped. The documents you're waiting for from wherever you've had them prepared. When they arrive. I'll tell you, she said, when they arrive. She went back through the gate. The cold air followed her across the garden and she did not look back, which was a discipline she had been practicing for 4 years and which had never, until this particular evening, felt like it required quite so much effort. Dinner was lamb and 2 remove courses and Edmund at his finest. He was charming in the particular way he was always charming when he was nervous, just slightly more of everything, the warmth a degree warmer, the laughter a beat quicker, the attention to the Duke so precisely calibrated that anyone watching would have thought them old friends rather than men who had met a fortnight ago. Cecily ate her lamb and watched Edmund perform and counted. The Duke ate his lamb and spoke pleasantly about the northern parcel and the spring planting and the history of the eastern boundary wall, and gave no indication whatsoever that he had spent the last hour in a walled garden being told the true shape of things. He was, she thought, very good at this. Not Edmund's kind of good, not the warm performance of a man making you feel seen in order to manage you. Something quieter. The ability to sit with knowledge and not let it move across his face before he was ready. She found it, she noted filed, did not examine, extraordinarily reassuring. At 9 o'clock Edmund said, Cecily, you look tired. Don't feel you must stay up on our account, with the particular solicitude of a man disposing of an inconvenience. You're right, she said. I am tired. Good night, Edmund. She did not look at the Duke. She went upstairs. She sat in the chair by the window in her room with her coat still on and her hands folded in her lap, and she listened to the house. At 9:30 she heard a carriage. Mr. Holt. At 10 o'clock she heard voices from the study below, indistinct, the low, careful sound of men discussing business. At 10:30 the voices stopped. At 20 minutes to 11 she heard a door close and a carriage leave. At 11 o'clock she heard footsteps in the corridor outside her room, Edmund's. She knew his tread pausing outside her door. She did not move, did not breathe differently. The footsteps moved on. She sat in the chair for another hour. Then Thomas knocked very softly twice, and she opened the door. His face told her before he spoke. He didn't sign, Thomas said. The Duke. Mr. Holt presented everything and the Duke listened, and then he said he needed more time to review the terms, and Mr. Holt left without the signature. Cecily breathed. Edmund, she said. Angry, Thomas said carefully. Very quiet, he's in the study. She nodded. Thomas, she said, be careful tomorrow, be very careful. I will, miss. She closed the door and went to the desk and sat down and allowed herself, in the dark, alone, where no one could see, approximately 30 seconds of something that was not quite relief and not quite gratitude and was, in its way, more overwhelming than either. Then she picked up her pen. There were documents to request and timelines to revise, and a plan that needed adjusting for the fact that it now had, for the first time in 8 months, more than one person in it. She began to write. Edmund was pleasant at breakfast. That was how she knew. Edmund was always at his most pleasant when he had decided something, when the calculation was complete and the path was clear and all that remained was the execution. The warmth came back, the ease, the particular quality of a man who had stopped being worried because he had found a solution, and the solution, whatever it was, satisfied him. Cecily ate her toast and watched him be pleasant and counted the things she did not know. She did not know what he had decided. She did not know how much he had understood from last night, whether he had concluded the Duke was simply cautious, or whether he had begun to suspect something more specific. She did not know where Thomas was. He had not appeared at breakfast, which he always did, which was the detail that sat at the back of her mind like a stone in a shoe, small and impossible to ignore. "You slept well?" Edmund asked. "Very," she said. "Good." He poured his coffee. "I thought we might ride this morning. The Duke has offered the use of his stables." "I'd like that," she said. He smiled. She smiled back. They were, she thought, both extraordinary at this. She found out about Thomas at 10 o'clock. She had gone to the stables on the pretense of choosing a horse and found instead the Duke's head groom, who told her with the careful neutrality of a man passing on information. He had been asked to pass on that Mr. Wren's footman had been sent ahead to the rented house that morning with luggage and would not be returning. Cecily stood in the stable doorway. "Sent ahead," she said. "That's what Mr. Wren said, miss." She thanked him. She walked back across the yard and through the kitchen garden and into the house and up to her room, and closed the door and stood in the middle of it for a moment with her hands at her sides. Thomas. Edmund had moved Thomas. Not dismissed, sent ahead, which meant he was still employed, still ostensibly under Edmund's control, still far enough away that he could not pass notes under doors or copy correspondence or stand in a kitchen and listen to what was said. It was not a punishment. It was a removal. Edmund had understood something. Not everything. If he had understood everything, the response would have been different, louder, and she would already be in a carriage home. But enough. Enough to understand that Thomas was a problem, and to solve the problem in the way Edmund always solved problems, quietly, plausibly, with a perfectly good reason ready if anyone asked. Sent ahead with luggage. Of course. She sat on the edge of the bed and thought. The documents from Gloucester, a week, maybe more. The trust document locked in Edmund's case which Thomas could no longer access. The Duke who had not signed last night and had thereby told Edmund that the straightforward path was closed. Edmund was recalculating. So was she. He came to her room at 7 o'clock. She had expected the corridor, expected him to catch her between rooms, where a conversation could be brief and deniable and over before she had organized herself. That was usually his method, but he knocked on her door at 7 o'clock, which meant he wanted the room. The closed door, the privacy, that was different. She opened it. He came in without being invited, which he had always done, in every room she had ever occupied, and which she had stopped mentioning because mentioning it accomplished nothing. He looked at her dressing table, her desk, the small stack of correspondence she had been careful to make look entirely unimportant. Then he sat in the chair by the window and looked at her with the expression she had not seen since the last time they had been alone together in a room and he had stopped performing. Not the warm Edmund. Not the charming one, the other one. "Sit down, Cecily," he said. She sat on the edge of the chair across from him. She kept her hands in her lap. She kept her face pleasant and attentive and entirely empty of everything she actually felt, which was the expression she had been perfecting since she was 16, and which had never been more necessary than right now. "The Duke didn't sign," Edmund said. "I heard," she said. "I imagine he simply wanted more time to review." "Don't," Edmund said pleasantly. She stopped. He looked at her. The silence between them was the specific silence of two people who know each other very well and have stopped pretending otherwise. And in that silence, Cecily felt the particular chill of being accurately read by someone who did not mean her well. "You've been busy," he said. "These past months, haven't you?" "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." He leaned back, crossed his legs. The ease of him, the terrible, practiced ease, was worse than anger would have been. "Thomas has been very devoted to you. He always was. I should have addressed that sooner." "Thomas is an excellent footman." "He was," Edmund said. "Yes," the past tense. She kept her face still. "Here is what's going to happen," Edmund said. "You're going to be cooperative with Mr. Holt when he returns tomorrow. You're going to sign what he puts in front of you. And the settlement will proceed as arranged, and everyone will be perfectly comfortable, and this, whatever this has been, will stop." "Edmund, the alternative," he said, still pleasantly, "is that I have a conversation with Mr. Holt about certain irregularities in the estate management. Irregularities that, on examination, might appear to originate with the trustee's co-signatory." He paused. "Which is you, Cecily. You are listed as co-signatory on 3 of the accounts. Did you know that?" She had known that. She had known it for 6 months and had spent considerable effort establishing, through her solicitor in Gloucester, a paper trail that demonstrated she had not been consulted on any of the transactions those accounts had been used for. That paper trail was in Gloucester and would be ready in approximately 1 week, and was doing her absolutely no good whatsoever at this specific moment. "Those signatures are forged," she said. Her voice was very level. "Are they?" Edmund said. "That's a serious accusation. You need documentation to support something like that." "I have documentation." "Do you?" He looked at her steadily. "Where?" She said nothing. "The thing about documentation," Edmund said, "is that it needs to exist in a place you can access. Files in solicitors' offices in other counties are inconvenient, difficult to produce quickly, whereas what I have is," he gestured lightly, "rather closer to hand." He stood up. He was not angry. That was the thing she could never explain to people who had not met Edmund. They expected rage, raised voices, the visible performance of a villain. Edmund was never that. Edmund was always this, measured, pleasant, entirely certain of his position. It was far worse than rage. "I've been patient with you," he said. "You know I have. Father always said I was too patient with you, that I gave you too much latitude, let you think you had more say in things than was practical." A pause. He wasn't wrong. "Don't," she said. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "I'm not disparaging him. I'm simply—" "I said don't." He looked at her for a moment. "Tomorrow," he said, "Mr. Holt at 10 o'clock. Think about what you want, Cecily. Think carefully." He went to the door. "Thomas," she said. He stopped. "Where is he?" "Safe," Edmund said. "Provided things go smoothly tomorrow. He's a good footman. I'd hate to have to let him go without a reference." He left. The door closed. She sat for a very long time. She sat until the light outside the window had gone completely, and the room was dark, and she had not moved to light the lamp because the dark was, in its way, easier. Because in the dark there was no desk to look at, no correspondence to review, no evidence of the 8 months of careful work that was currently sitting in Gloucester being entirely useless. Thomas. She had promised herself at the beginning of this that she would not let anyone else become collateral. She had been meticulous about it. She had kept Thomas at arm's length for months, had limited what she asked of him, had told him 3 times to step back if it became dangerous. He had not stepped back. And now he was somewhere safe, Edmund said, which meant safe until he wasn't, which meant safe as long as she cooperated, which was not safe at all. She pressed her hands flat on her knees. She was not going to cry. She had not cried in front of Edmund since she was 22 and had not done it since because it accomplished nothing and cost everything, and she was not going to start again in a dark room because her brother had outmaneuvered her on a timeline. She was going to think. She thought about tomorrow, about Mr. Holt and the proxy and what happened if she signed and what happened if she didn't. She thought about Gloucester and the documents that were not ready. She thought about the trust document in Edmund's locked case, which Thomas could no longer reach. She thought about the Duke, who had not signed last night and did not know why it mattered, who had said, "How can I help?" with the straightforward simplicity of a man who had decided and meant it. She thought about what she had told herself 8 months ago when she began. I will not ask anyone for help. I will not put anyone else in the path of this. I will do it myself, with documentation properly, and when it is done, it will be done completely and no one else will have paid for it. She had meant every word of that. She picked up her coat. The house was quiet at 9:30. She went down the back stairs and through the side door and across the dark garden, and the cold hit her the way it always did when she had been sitting still too long, sharply, usefully, like a hand against the face. She knew where his study was. She had noted it on the first day. She knocked. A pause, then, "Come." He was at his desk with a lamp and a letter he set aside when she entered. He looked at her, at the coat, the hour, whatever was on her face, and stood up. He did not say "Miss Wren" or "This is unexpected" or any of the things that would have required her to perform composure she was not certain she had left. He said, "Sit down." She sat. He sat across from her. He did not reach for the bell to call for tea or ask her if she was all right or do anything except look at her with that direct, uncomplicated attention and wait. She had rehearsed, on the walk across the garden, the careful version, the strategic version, the version that gave him what he needed to know without costing her anything she wasn't prepared to spend. She looked at him in the lamplight and found that she was very tired. "Edmund came to my room tonight," she said. "I thought he might," the Duke said, "after last night. He wants me to sign the proxy tomorrow, Mr. Holt at 10. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing," she said. I hadn't decided." "And now?" She looked at her hands, at the lamplight on the desk between them, at the letter he had set aside when she knocked. "Thomas," she said, "my footman. Edmund sent him away this morning out of reach. Edmund made it clear that Thomas's situation depends on my cooperation." She said it plainly. She had intended to say it differently, more controlled, more managed, but plainly was what came out, and she did not take it back. The Duke was quiet for a moment. "Where is he?" he said. "The rented house, I think, about 4 miles. He stood up, went to his desk, wrote something briefly, a note, short, folded and sealed before she could see it, and rang the bell. His footman appeared. "Tonight," the Duke said, "take this to the Wren house on the Ashford Road. There is a footman there named Thomas. Bring him back here. Give him the note first so he understands." The footman left. Cecily looked at the Duke. "You didn't ask me if that was the right thing to do," she said. "Was it not?" "No, it is. She stopped. "You didn't ask." "You came here at 9:30, he said, "which tells me you had already decided something needed to happen tonight. Thomas seemed like the clearest thing." He sat back down. "Now, tell me the rest," she told him. All of it, not the careful version, not the strategic version. The whole 8 months. The accounts and the forged signatures and the solicitor in Gloucester and the trust document in Edmund's locked case and the timeline that was 1 week too long. She told it the way she had never told it to anyone, straight through, without managing how it landed, without watching his face to calibrate what came next. When she finished, the lamp had burned lower and the room was quieter than it had been. The Duke was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The trust document, you need the original. Without it, everything else it's harder. It's possible, but it takes longer, and Edmund can contest." "I have a locksmith," the Duke said, "on the estate, very discreet." She stared at him. "Edmund's case," he said. "If it's here in this house, it's accessible." She stopped. "That's theft." "It's retrieval," he said. Of a document that belongs to you. It's still. Yes, he said. It is, I know. He looked at her steadily. Do you want it or not? She looked at him. She thought about 8 months of being meticulous and careful and correct. About doing it properly, with documentation, through the right channels. She thought about Edmund at 7 o'clock with his terrible pleasant voice, and Thomas 4 miles away in a rented house. Yes, she said. He nodded. Then we need Edmund out of the house tomorrow morning, he said. I'll arrange a ride. He won't refuse. He wants to keep me amenable until Holt arrives. He paused. While he's gone. I can manage the timing, she said. I know you can. She looked at him across the lamp. She thought about I will do it myself and I will not ask anyone in 8 months of being entirely, deliberately alone in this. She thought about how that had felt. She thought about how this felt. Why, she said quietly. You don't, Edmund is your neighbor. The settlement would have been straightforward for you. You'd have gotten the land, the terms were. The terms, the Duke said, were built on 8 months of lies and 4 years of theft, and the person they were designed to leave with nothing is sitting in my study at 9:30 because she has run out of other options. He said it without heat. That's not something I'm prepared to be party to. The lamp flickered. Outside, somewhere across the dark garden, a horse moved in the stables. I've been doing this alone, she said. She had not meant to say it. It came out anyway. I know, he said. I was very good at it. You were extraordinary at it, he said, and it almost wasn't enough. That's the part that matters. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, The ride tomorrow, what reason will you give him? I'll think of something, the Duke said. I usually do. And Cecily Wren, who had not smiled genuinely, unguardedly, without calculating what it communicated in approximately 4 years, almost smiled. Thomas arrived at 11:30. He looked tired and relieved, and when he saw Cecily, like a man setting down something heavy he had been carrying since morning. She stood up. Miss, he said. I told you to be careful, she said. I was, he said, mostly. She looked at him for a moment, then she said, You're working for the Duke now, temporarily. He'll explain the arrangement. Thomas looked at the Duke, who nodded once. Gladly, Thomas said, with a feeling that suggested gladly did not begin to cover it. She left at midnight. The Duke walked her to the side door, not because she needed walking, but because he did it and she found she did not object. At the door she stopped and turned. Tomorrow, she said, after the ride if Edmund comes back before we're done. He won't, the Duke said. I'll make certain the ride is long. And if Holt arrives early. Miss Wren, she stopped. Go to sleep, he said. Tomorrow is planned. You don't have to count everything tonight. She looked at him. Nobody had ever told her to stop counting. Usually people either didn't notice she was counting or benefited from it and left her to it. Old habit, she said. I know, he said. Sleep anyway. She went out into the cold. She did not look back. But she noticed, crossing the dark garden toward the rented house, that her hands were not, for the first time in a very long time, running through timelines. They were simply at her sides. It was, she thought, an extraordinary feeling. She was fairly certain she did not entirely trust it yet. She was equally certain that it did not, at this precise moment, matter. The morning was clear and cold, and Edmund was in excellent spirits. Cecily watched him at breakfast and read his mood the way she had always read it, not from what he said but from the specific quality of his ease, the precise calibration of his pleasantness. This morning he was the Edmund who had already won, not the Edmund who was working towards something, not the Edmund who was managing variables, the Edmund who had arrived at the conclusion and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. He thought she had decided. She had not corrected him. Ashford has suggested a ride, Edmund said, pouring his coffee. The northern parcel. He wants to show me the boundary markers. Apparently there's a question about the eastern line. "How interesting," Cecily said. "You don't ride in the cold," Edmund said. Not a question. A reminder, the particular kind of reminder that was also an instruction. "Never," Cecily agreed. "I'll be back by noon." He set down his cup. "Mr. Holt at 10, you remember." "Of course," she said. Edmund smiled. Warm, satisfied, entirely certain. She smiled back. She waited until the horses were out of sight. 4 minutes, she gave him 4 minutes, enough to clear the drive and the first bend in the road, enough that turning back would require a reason. She stood at the window of her room and counted, and when the 4 minutes were done, she picked up her coat and went to find Thomas. He was in the corridor outside Edmund's study. He had been there, she understood, since 7 o'clock. "The case," she said quietly. "On the desk," Thomas said. "He didn't take it with him." She looked at him. "I noticed this morning," he said. "When I brought his coat." She took a breath. She had spent a portion of the night, the portion after she was supposed to be sleeping, the portion the Duke had specifically told her not to spend on timelines, thinking about this. About what it meant to take the case. About the line between retrieval and theft, and where exactly she was standing relative to that line. She had concluded, somewhere around 3 in the morning, that the line mattered considerably less than Thomas, standing in a rented house 4 miles away wondering if his situation was going to resolve itself. "The locksmith," she said. "Waiting downstairs," Thomas said. "The Duke sent him at 7. The locksmith was a small, quiet man named Garrett who looked at the case with the professional detachment of someone who had been asked to open a great many things in his life, and had developed no opinions about any of them. 5 minutes, he said. It took 3. The document was there. She had known it would be. Thomas had been right. The dimensions were correct. She had done the calculation 3 times. But there was a difference between knowing and seeing, and when she lifted it out of the case and unfolded it and saw her father's handwriting at the top of the first page, she felt something move through her that was not quite any emotion she had a word for. The original trust document, signed by her father, dated 11 years ago when she was 12, and he had been thinking about the future with the particular careful attention of a man who understood that futures required preparation. Her name, her estate, her father's intention, clear and unambiguous and entirely unlike what Edmund had been doing with it for 4 years. She stood at Edmund's desk and read it all the way through. Thomas stood at the door. The locksmith was already gone. She had brought her own case, small, leather, the one she kept her correspondence in. She placed the trust document inside it. Then she looked at the rest of the case's contents. Letters, most of them from Mr. Holt. She read the first 2 quickly and understood within 3 sentences that they were more useful than the trust document, specific, detailed, with numbers and dates and instructions that constituted, if she was reading them correctly, a fairly comprehensive record of exactly what Edmund had been doing and when. She took those too. She told herself as she did it that she was taking evidence, documentation, the kind of thing that made a difference in front of a solicitor. She was aware that she was also, technically, going through her brother's private correspondence. She found she was at peace with this. She was back in her room at 8:30 with the case on her desk, and the fire burning in her hands, steadier than she would have expected, folded in her lap. She had 1 hour before Mr. Holt arrived. She spent 20 minutes of it writing a letter to her solicitor in Gloucester, detailing what she had found, and what she needed him to do with the documents she would send by this evening's post. She spent 15 minutes reading through the letters from Mr. Holt more carefully and noting, in the margins of her own paper, the specific dates and figures that mattered most. She spent the remaining 25 minutes sitting quietly in her chair, looking at the fire, doing nothing in particular. This last was unusual for her. She was not generally a person who sat quietly doing nothing. She was a person who used available time. She was, she thought, perhaps a little tired. Not the tired of a bad night. She had had bad nights before, and this was not that. Something different. The particular tiredness of a person who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time and has just, in the last 12 hours, been allowed to set part of it down. She thought about the Duke saying you don't have to count everything tonight. She thought about the fact that she had, in fact, counted a great deal after that, but had also, at some point between the counting, slept. She thought about how she had walked back across the dark garden with her hands simply at her sides. She was still thinking about this when there was a knock at her door. It was not Mr. Holt. It was the Duke, in his riding coat, with the particular look of a man who has been riding faster than strictly necessary. "You're back," she said. "It's not noon." "No," he said. Edmund had questions about the eastern boundary that required more detailed answers than I was prepared to give, so I suggested we continue the conversation over the settlement documents this afternoon, which gave him reason to come back willingly. He paused. "He'll be here in 10 minutes. Did you?" "Yes," she said. He looked at her, at the case on her desk. "Everything. The trust document and 8 letters from Mr. Holt that are considerably more useful than I expected." Something moved across his face, relief, she thought, and something else, something quieter. "Good," he said. "Then we have 10 minutes. "For what?" "For you to tell me what you need from the next 2 hours, he said. "Before Edmund walks through that door and Mr. Holt arrives, and we have to behave as though none of this morning happened." She looked at him. She thought about 8 months of planning alone, of knowing exactly what she needed and exactly how to get it, and never having to explain it to anyone because there had been no one to explain it to. She thought about how strange it was to be asked. How strange, and how, she noted this, filed it, did not examine it entirely, unexpectedly welcome. "I need Edmund to believe, until this afternoon, that I am going to sign," she said. "I need Mr. Holt to arrive and present the documents, and I need witnesses in the room when I don't. I can arrange witnesses." "Lady Partridge," she said, "if she's willing, she noticed Edmund, you said so, she should be there." "She will be delighted," the Duke said, with the expression of a man who knew his aunt very well. "Genuinely delighted. I would not deprive her of this for anything." "And I need," Cecily said, "for Edmund to understand when it happens that it is finished. Not delayed, not renegotiable, finished." "Yes," the Duke said. "He'll try to manage it," she said. "He always does. He'll find the angle that makes it seem like there's still a path." "Not this time," the Duke said quietly. "The letters from Holt, those aren't something he can manage away, not in front of witnesses." She nodded. She looked at the case on her desk, at the fire, at the Duke standing in her doorway in his riding coat with mud on his boots, and the focused, settled expression of a man who had decided and was not reconsidering. "Thank you," she said. She had not said it before, not directly, not like this. She had acknowledged, she had accepted, she had been efficiently grateful in the way of someone who recognized useful assistance. But she had not said thank you in the straightforward, unmanaged way of one person saying it to another. He looked at her when she said it. Just for a moment, something moved in his expression that she did not immediately have a name for. "Don't," he said. "Don't what?" "Thank me as though it's a transaction. I didn't do this for," he stopped. "Just don't." She looked at him. "All right," she said. He nodded. "Edmund will be at the door in 6 minutes. I'll speak to Lady Partridge." He left. Cecily sat for exactly 30 seconds. Then she stood up, straightened her dress, picked up the case, and went downstairs. Edmund arrived at 9:05. He came in from the ride with cold in his coat and satisfaction on his face, and looked at Cecily in the front hall with the warm, proprietorial pleasure of a man who believed he had arranged everything correctly. "Good morning," he said. "You look rested." "I slept well," she said. "Good." He handed his coat to the footman. "Holt at 10, we'll use the study." "Of course," she said. She walked beside him toward the study, and her face was pleasant and attentive and entirely arranged. And if Edmund had looked at her hands, he would have seen them folded in the familiar way, quiet and still. He did not look at her hands. He never had. Mr. Holt arrived at 5 minutes to 10. He was a thin man who wore his nervousness in his shoulders. They were always slightly raised, as though he expected something to fall. He had been Edmund's solicitor for 3 years, and had, Cecily observed, the specific look of a man who had told himself a long time ago that his professional obligations superseded his personal ones, and had been telling himself this so consistently that he had almost stopped noticing. He set his case on the study desk. Edmund introduced Cecily with the particular warmth of a man presenting a fait accompli. Mr. Holt looked at her. She looked at him. "Miss Wren," he said. "Mr. Holt," she said pleasantly, "I believe we have a great deal to discuss." He opened his case. The door behind them opened. Lady Partridge came in. She was 71 years old and moved like a woman of 50, who had decided that age was largely a matter of attitude, and had maintained this position successfully for 2 decades. She was wearing dark red, and an expression that suggested she had been waiting for this particular morning for quite some time. "Lady Partridge," Edmund said, and his pleasant voice did not quite cover the surprise. "I wasn't aware you'd be joining us." "No," said Lady Partridge, sitting down in the chair nearest the fire with the decisiveness of a woman claiming territory. "I imagine you weren't." The Duke came in behind her. And behind him, Cecily had arranged this. She had asked Thomas, and Thomas had been extremely efficient, 2 of the Duke's neighbors who had stopped by that morning for entirely unrelated reasons and had been, very naturally, invited to sit in on a brief business matter. Edmund looked at the room. She watched him count the people in it. She watched him understand that the room was not what he had arranged. He looked at her. She looked back at him with her pleasant expression, and her folded hands, and everything she had been holding for 4 years behind her eyes. "Shall we begin?" she said. Mr. Holt began. He presented the settlement terms with the careful efficiency of a man performing a task he had done many times, and Cecily listened and noted, and let him speak. Edmund watched her from across the desk with the particular quality of attention of a man who was beginning to feel the ground shift but could not yet identify where the movement was coming from. When Mr. Holt finished, she said, "Thank you. I have some questions about the terms." "Of course," Mr. Holt said. "Specifically," she said, "regarding the provisions in Section 4 relating to the management of the Wren estate accounts." Mr. Holt looked at Edmund. Edmund's expression did not change. "Standard provisions." "Standard," Cecily said. "Yes." She opened her case. "I wonder if you could help me understand how these provisions relate to the account activity detailed in your letters to my brother over the past 18 months. She placed the first letter on the desk. Mr. Holt's shoulders went up another half-inch. "Where did you?" "The second letter," she said, placing it beside the first, "addresses the northern farmland sale specifically. The third concerns the tenant arrangements. The fourth—" "Cecily," Edmund's voice still pleasant, still controlled, "the last of the control. The fourth is perhaps the most interesting," she said, "because it predates the sale by 3 weeks and includes, in the 3rd paragraph, a specific instruction regarding my signature." She placed the 4th letter in the center of the desk where everyone in the room could see it. The room was very quiet. Lady Partridge, by the fire, had not moved. She was reading the letter closest to her with the focused attention of a woman who reads quickly and retains everything. The neighbors looked at Edmund. The Duke looked at no one. He was standing near the window in the way he stood when he was paying the most attention, still, slightly turned, like a man who has arranged himself so that nothing in the room escapes him. Edmund looked at Cecily. And Cecily looked at her brother, at the face she had known her entire life, the face that had been warm and charming and terrible in equal measure for 23 years. And she put the trust document on the desk beside the letters. "I also have this," she said. Mr. Holt stood up. "I need to." He reached for his case. "Mr. Holt," the Duke said from the window without raising his voice, "I'd ask you to stay." Mr. Holt sat down. Edmund said nothing for a long moment. She had expected, she realized, something, the charm rerouted, the angle found, the version of this that Edmund could manage. She had prepared for it. She had gone through, in the small hours, every path he might take and what she would say to each of them. He didn't take any of them. He looked at the letters on the desk. He looked at the trust document. He looked at the room, Lady Partridge by the fire, the neighbors with their careful faces, Mr. Holt with his raised shoulders, and he understood, with the specific, accurate intelligence that had always been both his greatest asset and now his undoing, that there was no path. Then he looked at Cecily. He said, "Father trusted me with this." Not an argument, not a performance, just the thing he had been telling himself, she understood, for 4 years. The story he had constructed to make it something other than what it was. She looked at him. "Father trusted you with me," she said quietly. "That's what he did, and you decided that meant the same thing as the estate." Silence. "It didn't," she said. "It never did." Edmund was still. And Cecily Wren, who had been counting her brother's lies for 23 years and had not cried about any of them since she was 22, felt something shift in her chest that she was not going to examine in a room full of people. She picked up the trust document. She held it in both hands. "I will not be signing the proxy," she said. "Mr. Holt will provide full disclosure of the account activity to my solicitor in Gloucester, who is expecting his correspondence by Friday. The Wren estate management will transfer, with immediate effect, to an independent trustee to be named by the court." She looked at Mr. Holt. "I imagine," she said, "that you have a great deal to think about." Mr. Holt, whose shoulders had not descended at any point in the last 20 minutes, gathered his case and left. The neighbors stayed long enough to establish, clearly and collectively, that they had witnessed everything. Then they left. Lady Partridge stood up from her chair by the fire and smoothed her skirts and looked at Edmund with the expression of a woman who has known something for some time and has been entirely patient about waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. She said nothing. She patted Cecily's hand once briefly as she passed. Then she left. Edmund left last. He did not say anything else. There was, she thought, nothing left to say, and Edmund had always known when a room was finished. He picked up his coat from the chair where he'd left it. He walked to the door. He stopped. "The letters," he said without turning. "How long have you had them?" "Since this morning," she said. A pause. "And before that?" 8 months, she said. "I had everything else." He absorbed this. "You came here on purpose," he said. "Yes. To finish it." "To finish it properly," she said, "with documentation, with witnesses, so that it couldn't be undone." He stood at the door for a moment, then he left. The front door opened and closed. A carriage some time later. She stood at the desk alone. The fire had burned lower. The letters were still spread across the desk, Edmund's letters, her father's trust document, the careful paper record of 4 years of what had been done to something that had been meant for her. The Duke was still in the room. He had been so quiet that she had almost forgotten. She turned. He was at the window looking out at the drive. She could not see his expression. "It's done," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at the letters on the desk. She thought about picking them up, about organizing them, about the letter to Gloucester and the timeline for the court application and the independent trustee and the 8 months of work that was going to require, now, another month of careful unwinding. She thought about all of it, and then she stood very still in the middle of the room and did not do any of it. She heard the Duke move quietly, unhurriedly, and then he was at the desk and he was gathering the letters himself, stacking them carefully, placing them in her case with the attentiveness of someone who has decided to be useful and is going about it with no drama whatsoever. She watched him. "You don't have to." "I know," he said. He closed the case. He looked at her directly. In the way she was beginning to understand was simply how he looked at things he considered worth looking at, and he said, "How are you?" Not formally. Not as the thing you say when you mean something else, just "how are you?" She opened her mouth. She intended to say perfectly well or better than expected or any of the variations she had been producing in response to that question for 4 years. She looked at him in the low firelight, with the case closed on the desk between them and her father's trust document finally in her hands, and the sound of Edmund's carriage fading down the drive. "I don't know yet," she said. "I think I won't know for a little while." He nodded. "That's fair," he said. And Cecily, who had been managing her own answers for 23 years, thought that it was, in fact, entirely fair, and sat down. 3 days passed. They were, on the surface, quiet days, the ordinary business of a country house in November, meals and correspondence and the particular unhurried rhythm of a place that had no immediate crisis to manage. Cecily wrote letters. She walked the grounds. She sat in the library twice and read, or attempted to read, and managed approximately 40 pages before realizing she had retained none of them. Edmund did not leave. That was the thing she had not fully planned for. She had assumed, had told herself. In the careful way she told herself things that needed to be true in order for the plan to work, that Edmund would go. That the morning in the study would be sufficient, that a man who understood when a room was finished would understand when a situation was finished and remove himself accordingly. Edmund did not remove himself. He stayed in the rented house 2 miles down the road, and he sent a note on the second day that said, in Edmund's pleasant, controlled hand, "I think we should speak before either of us takes further steps. There is still a great deal to be resolved between us." She did not reply. On the third day he sent another, shorter, "Cecily, there are things you don't know, things about father, about why he made the arrangements he did. You should hear them from me before you hear them elsewhere." She read this one twice. Then she put it in her case with the letters from Mr. Holt and did not answer that one either. "He's trying a new angle," she told the Duke. They were in the East Garden, the walled one which had become, she had noticed, the place they ended up when there was something to discuss that required privacy and cold air. She was not certain when this had become established practice. Somewhere between the first evening and now. "The father angle," the Duke said. "He says there are things I don't know, about why father made the arrangements." "Is that possible?" She thought about it honestly. It was the kind of question Edmund was very good at, the kind that introduced doubt where there had been certainty, that found the small crack in the foundation and pressed. "My father loved me," she said. "He was not a complicated man in the important ways. He believed in being straightforward, and he believed in doing right by the people in his care, and he left me his estate because it was mine, and he wanted me to have it." "Then Edmund is looking for a path," she said. "Yes, he always is." She paused. "The thing about Edmund," she said, "is that he isn't wrong, that there is still a great deal to be resolved. There is the court application, the account history, the independent trustee. All of it has to go through properly, and any of it could be complicated if Edmund decides to complicate it." The Duke was quiet for a moment. "He's going to appear at the formal meeting," he said. "Whatever we arrange with the solicitors, he'll find a way to be there. He'll bring something." "Yes. Then we need to be ready for what he brings." "I've been thinking about that," she said. "The one thing I don't have, the one thing the Gloucester documents don't cover, is the proxy signatures. The ones on the accounts. I know they're forged, My solicitor is reasonably certain they're forged, but reasonably certain is not the same as provable. In a room with Edmund present and his own solicitor providing counter-documentation, reasonably certain is not enough. She looked at the rose beds, at the careful tied canes, at the wall that kept the wind out. I need a handwriting analysis, she said, a proper one, from someone whose opinion carries weight. I know someone, the Duke said. She turned to look at him. My solicitor in London, he said. He keeps a specialist on retainer, documents, provenance, that sort of thing. He's given evidence in court 3 times. How quickly can you reach him? I'll write today, he said. If I send a writer, we'll have a response by Thursday. Thursday was 4 days away. She calculated. The meeting with her Gloucester solicitor was scheduled for the following Monday. She had arranged it by correspondence the day after the study, and he had confirmed, and it was, she thought, enough time if the handwriting analysis came back by Thursday, and if Edmund did not. He's here, Thomas said. They both turned. Thomas was at the garden gate with the expression he wore when he was delivering information. He would have preferred not to deliver. Edmund, he said, at the house. He's asking for you, miss. He told the footman he won't leave until he's spoken to you. Cecily looked at the Duke. The Duke looked at her. He's moved up his timeline, she said. Yes. He's brought something. If he's here in person, he's brought something. Probably, she straightened, smoothed her coat, put her hands at her sides, not folded, just still. All right, she said, let's see what it is. Edmund was in the front sitting room. He had chosen it deliberately, she thought. The front sitting room was public-facing, the room used for callers and formal visits, the room that said I am here on legitimate business more clearly than any other room in the house. Edmund always chose his rooms carefully. He stood when she entered. He looked, and this was unexpected, and she noted it, tired. Not the performed tiredness of a man asking for sympathy. Actually tired, in the way of someone who had not slept well for several days and had stopped being able to hide it. Cecily, he said. Edmund, she sat down. She did not invite him to do the same. He sat anyway. The Duke came in behind her and stood near the door, not intrusively, not performatively, simply present. Edmund looked at him for a moment and then looked at Cecily with the expression of a man recalibrating. I wanted to speak with you privately, Edmund said. Whatever you have to say, Cecily said, you can say here. Edmund considered this. Then, with the sigh of a man accepting terms he doesn't like, fine. He reached into his coat. He produced a letter. She recognized the handwriting before he set it on the table between them, her father's. She did not reach for it immediately. She looked at it, at the familiar slant of it, the capital letters, the small habit of underlining, and then she looked at Edmund. Where did you get that? She said. Father gave it to me, Edmund said. The week before he died, he wrote 2 letters that week. You have yours, I have mine. I don't have mine, she said carefully. You'll find it with the estate documents. He left it with the solicitor to be given to you when the trust transferred. He paused. He wrote to me separately to explain his thinking. His thinking, she said. About the arrangement, about why he set it up the way he did, why he gave me trusteeship rather than, Edmund stopped. He was worried about you, Cecily, after he died. He thought he knew you were capable, he said so, but he thought the transition would be difficult and he wanted someone to. Edmund. He wanted someone to look after you. The word sat in the room. She had expected this, had told the Duke this was the angle, the one Edmund would press. She had thought herself prepared for it. She had not, she realized, been entirely prepared for hearing it in her father's context. For the small, sharp pain of it, not because it changed anything, but because she could hear, underneath Edmund's use of it, the genuine thing her father had felt, the love in it, the worry. The fact that Edmund had taken a true thing and made it into a tool was so entirely Edmund that it almost broke something in her. "He wanted someone to look after me," she said, "and you decided that meant the accounts." "I decided it meant keeping the estate stable." "You sold the northern farmland." "I made decisions." "You forged my signature." He stopped. The room was quiet. "Read the letter," he said. "Whatever you think of me, read what he wrote. He trusted me, Cecily. He wasn't wrong to. I made mistakes, I know I did, but he wasn't wrong about." "Give me the letter," she said. He pushed it across the table. She picked it up. She read it. Edmund was quiet. The Duke near the door was quiet. The fire was the only sound in the room. Her father had written to Edmund the way he always wrote, directly, warmly, without performance. He had written about the estate and the trust and what he hoped for Cecily. And it was, as Edmund had said, a letter full of love and worry and the particular helplessness of a man arranging the future as best he could from a position of knowing he would not see it. He had asked Edmund to look after her. He had not asked Edmund to manage her. He had not asked him to control the accounts or slow the trust transfer or represent himself as Cecily's guardian in ways that no legal document authorized. He had asked him to be a brother to a sister who was going to lose their father. He had believed Edmund would understand the difference. She folded the letter. She looked at Edmund. He was watching her with something she had not expected to see on his face. Not calculation, not the performance of regret, just something quiet and unguarded and tired. "I know," he said before she could speak. "I know what I did. I know it isn't. I know the letter doesn't change it." She looked at him. "Then why did you bring it?" she said. "Because I wanted you to know that he trusted me," Edmund said. "That it wasn't that I didn't." He stopped. "I wanted it to matter, that he thought well of me." The room was very still. Cecily held her father's letter in both hands and looked at her brother's tired face and felt, with the particular precision of someone who has spent 23 years knowing a person, exactly what was true and what wasn't. What was true? Their father had trusted Edmund. What was also true? Edmund had spent 4 years dismantling everything that trust had meant. What was also quietly true? The letter was not a justification. It was an explanation. And there was, she thought, a difference, though not a difference that changed what happened next. "I'm keeping the letter," she said. Edmund blinked. "It's mine now," she said. "He wrote it to you, but you brought it here and put it on this table, and it has my father's handwriting on it, and I am keeping it." He looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, "All right." She stood up. "The meeting with my solicitor is Monday," she said. "Edmund, don't make this harder than it has to be. You know what the documents show. You know what the handwriting analysis will show when it comes back." He looked up at her. "It's coming back," she said. "The analysis Thursday." His expression shifted. "Cooperate with the process," she said. "Return what can be returned. Make the accounting transparent. That's what I'm asking. It's less than you deserve and you know it." Edmund was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, "The northern farmland. The sale, part of it was legitimate. The land was underperforming and I know," she said. "I'll look at the accounts properly once I have access. Some of what I did." "Edmund," he stopped. "Monday," she said. "Be there or don't. But if you're not there, I'll proceed without you, and the outcome will be the same either way." She walked to the door. "Cecily," she stopped. "I'm sorry about Thomas," Edmund said. "Sending him away, that was," he paused. "That was unkind." She stood with her hand on the door frame. She thought about what to say to that, about the various true things she could offer and what any of them would cost her, and what they would accomplish. "Yes," she said, "it was." She walked out. She kept walking until she reached the library. She did not know precisely why the library. It was not her library. It had nothing particular to recommend it over any other room, except that it was quiet and had large windows and was, she had found in the last several days, the room in this house that felt most like somewhere she could simply be without performing anything. She sat in the chair nearest the window. She held her father's letter. She was not going to cry. She had said this to herself before and had meant it, and she meant it now in this chair, with the winter light coming through the window and her father's handwriting in her hands. She heard the door. The Duke came in and sat in the chair across from her without a word. He did not ask if she was all right. He did not say anything about Edmund or Monday or the handwriting analysis. He sat down. She looked at the window. "He wasn't a monster," she said. "Edmund. People expect when I explain it, they expect him to be a monster, and he isn't. He's something harder than that." "I know," the Duke said. "He took things that were true, father's trust, the estate needing management, me needing. He took things that were real and he made them into reasons. And the worst part is that I think he believed them. I think he still does." "Yes," the Duke said. "That's not an excuse." "No, it isn't." She looked down at the letter. "He loved my father," she said. "In his way, whatever he did, he loved him." "I believe that," the Duke said. "I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything with it," he said. "Not today." She looked at him. He was watching her with the direct, uncomplicated attention she had stopped trying to prepare for, the attention of a man who looked at things he found worth looking at and did not apologize for it. "You've been very patient," she said. "Have I?" "Since Monday, since the study. You haven't asked for anything. You haven't said anything about what happens after Monday or what I'm going to do or—" "It wasn't the right time." "And now," he looked at her steadily. "Now," he said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, not strategically." She looked at him. "After Monday," he said, "after the solicitor and the trust and all of it, when you go back to the estate, what are you going back to?" "My home," she said. "My father's estate, what I've been." "I know what you've been fighting for," he said. "That's not what I asked." She was quiet. "What are you going back to?" he said again quietly. "Not the estate. You," she looked at the window, "at the winter garden, at the bare rose beds with their careful tied canes waiting." She thought about the house she had been fighting to return to for 4 years. She could picture every room of it, the library, the morning room, the garden her mother had planted, the view from the upstairs window that was the first thing she had looked for when she woke up as a child. She had held that picture in her mind like a compass point for 8 months. She looked at it now and tried to see herself in it. "I don't know," she said finally. "I've been thinking about getting there for so long that I haven't." She stopped. "I haven't thought much about what it looks like when I arrive." "No," he said, "I thought that might be the case." She looked at him. "I'm not asking you anything," he said. "Not today. You've had enough today." A pause. "But after Monday, when things are settled, I'd like to ask you something. And I'd like you to have had enough time to know what your answer actually is." She held her father's letter. She thought about a man sitting in this library, not this man, another one, a duke who had died before he could explain anything, and the friendship he had kept for 30 years, and the trust he had placed in people he believed would honor it. She thought about what her father had asked Edmund to be, and what Edmund had done instead. She thought about what it felt like to be asked, simply and directly, "What do you need?" and to have the answer taken seriously. "After Monday," she said. "After Monday," he agreed. She nodded. She looked back at the window. Beside her, the Duke sat in his chair and said nothing further, and the library was quiet. And outside, the winter light moved slowly across the garden. It was, she thought, an extraordinary thing to sit in a room with someone and feel no particular need to manage the silence. She had not felt that in a very long time. She let herself feel it now. Monday came gray and cold and entirely businesslike. The solicitor from Gloucester was a small, precise man named Mr. Carey, who arrived at 9:30 with 2 cases, an assistant, and the focused energy of someone who had been preparing for this meeting for 3 weeks and was not going to waste a moment of it. He set up at the Duke's dining table, the largest table in the house, which the Duke had offered without being asked, and laid out his documents with the systematic care of a man building an argument 1 stone at a time. The handwriting analysis had arrived Thursday, as promised. Cecily had read it twice, and then set it down carefully and looked out the window for a long moment before picking it up again. Consistent with forgery, it said, in the dry, certain language of a man who had given evidence in court 3 times and knew exactly which words carried weight. The proxy signatures attributed to Miss Wren bear no reliable correspondence to her verified hand. The inconsistencies are not attributable to natural variation. She had put it in her case. She had not said anything to the Duke about it that evening. He had looked at her face when she came to dinner and had not asked. Edmund arrived at 10 o'clock. He came alone, no solicitor, which told her something. Mr. Holt had, she gathered, reviewed the situation following the meeting in the study and made certain professional calculations. Edmund arriving without a solicitor meant Edmund arriving without a defense, which meant Edmund had decided, in the 4 days since the sitting room, to do what she had asked. Cooperate with the process. He sat across the table from Mr. Carey, and she gave him this quiet, cooperative in the way of a man who had finished arguing and had not yet decided what came next. He answered Mr. Carey's questions directly. He produced the documents he had been asked to produce. He did not perform. It was, she thought, the most honest she had seen him in 4 years. It did not change what the documents showed. The meeting took 3 hours. Mr. Carey went through the accounts with the thorough, unhurried efficiency of a man who had done this before and would do it again and felt no personal investment in the outcome beyond getting it right. He presented the timeline. He presented the handwriting analysis. He presented the letters from Mr. Holt. Edmund looked at the letters when Mr. Carey laid them out. He looked at Cecily. She looked back at him. He looked away first. At 12:30, Mr. Carey set down his pen and said, "The trust will transfer to independent management by the end of the month. The account irregularities will be referred to the appropriate parties. The proxy signatures will be formally voided." He looked at his notes. "I would estimate the full resolution will take approximately 4 months, perhaps 3, if we encounter no complications." "We won't," Edmund said. Everyone looked at him. "I won't complicate it," he said. "I said I'd cooperate. I will." Mr. Carey looked at Cecily. She nodded. "Then I believe we have everything we need," Mr. Carey said, and began to pack his cases with the satisfied efficiency of a man whose work was done. Edmund left without speaking to her. He put on his coat in the hall and he paused just for a moment at the door, and she thought he was going to say something. Something about their father, perhaps, or about the letter, or about the estate and what he had intended and what he had done instead. He didn't. He opened the door and walked out. She stood in the hall and listened to the carriage go. She thought about 23 years, about the brother who had been charming and terrible in equal measure, who had taken their father's trust and used it for himself, who had brought a letter to a sitting room because he wanted it to matter that their father had thought well of him. She thought about the fact that it did matter, that she could not make it not matter. That was the thing about people you had loved for 23 years. You could be entirely clear about what they had done and still find in the same breath that the love was not quite gone. It was just changed, ruined in some essential way, still there. She thought this was possibly the most exhausting thing about being human. Then she put on her coat and went to find the Duke. He was in the East Garden. Of course he was. She stood at the gate for a moment and looked at him, at the familiar posture of him, hands behind his back, looking at the dormant roses with the easy patience of a man who understood that dormant things were not dead things. She went through the gate. He turned when he heard her. She had not planned what to say. She had spent the last 4 days planning a great many things, but not this, not what came after Monday, not what she wanted the answer to be when he asked his question. She had told herself she would know when the time came. The time had come. She was not certain she knew. "It's done," she said. "Yes," he said. Mr. Carey looked satisfied. "He is. 3 hours of meticulous documentation is Mr. Carey's idea of a very good morning." "And yours." "Mine too," she said, "in its way." She stood beside him and looked at the rose beds. "Edmund left," she said. "I know, I saw the carriage." "He didn't complicate it. He said he wouldn't, and he didn't." "No," the Duke said. "I didn't think he would, not after Thursday." She looked at him. "You knew about the handwriting analysis," she said, "before I told you." "My solicitor sent a copy directly." "You might have mentioned that." "You needed to read it alone," he said simply. "I thought so anyway." She looked at him for a moment. He was, she thought, extraordinary at knowing when not to be present. She had noticed it in small ways over the past weeks, the moments he removed himself, the silences he did not fill, the questions he did not ask. It was a rarer quality than most people understood. "You said after Monday," she said. He looked at her. "You said you wanted to ask me something. After Monday." "Yes," he said. "It's after Monday." He was quiet for a moment, then, "What do you want, Cecily?" She stilled. He had used her name. Not Miss Wren, her name, simply, the way you used a name when you had stopped needing the formality to mean something. "That's your question," she said. "It's the only one that matters," he said. "Everything else, the estate, the trust, the 4 months of resolution, that's all going to happen whether I ask you anything or not. What I want to know is what you want, not what you've been fighting for, not what you're going back to." He paused. "What you actually want." She looked at the rose beds. She thought about the question he had asked her, the first time in this garden. "What is it you actually need, Miss Wren?" And how she had deflected it cleanly and walked away before it could become anything else. She had been deflecting variations of that question for 4 years. She was very tired of deflecting. "I want to go home," she said. "I've wanted that for 4 years, and I'm going to want it until I'm standing in it." And then she stopped. "And then I don't know." "That's honest." "It's the most honest I can be right now," he nodded. "I'm not asking you to know," he said. "I'm asking you to, I want you to know that I'm here, after Monday, after 4 months, after however long the resolution takes." He paused. "I want you to know that I have no intention of being convenient about this." She turned to look at him. "Convenient," she said. "The sort of thing that's easy to leave," he said. "Easy to put aside because there are other things to attend to and the timing is complicated and you haven't quite decided." He looked at her directly. "I'm not going to be that. I want you to know that before you go." She looked at him. She thought about the gate at 6 o'clock the first evening, the note she had sent, the decision she had made on the walk over, the rehearsed version she had arrived with and had not used. She thought about 3 words delivered with the straightforward simplicity of a man who had decided. "How can I help?" She thought about her hands simply at her sides. "You should know," she said, "that I am not easy. I count things. I plan 8 months in advance. I have trouble asking for help, and I will probably always have trouble asking for help, and I'm not accustomed to." "I know," he said. "You've known me for 3 weeks." "I know enough," he said. "The rest I intend to learn." She looked at him for a long moment. The winter light was doing something particular to the garden. That low, clear quality of November afternoons, the kind that made everything look like it was waiting for something. "When the estate is settled," she said carefully, When I'm home and the accounts are straight and I've had time to." "Yes," he said. "I'm not saying yes," she said. "I'm saying when." "I know the difference," he said. She believed that he did. She left the next morning. Her carriage was brought round at 8, and Thomas loaded her cases with the efficient pleasure of a man going somewhere he was glad to be going. And Lady Partridge appeared in the doorway in her dressing gown to say goodbye, which was, she gathered from the Duke's expression, entirely unprecedented, and which Lady Partridge accomplished with magnificent dignity regardless. "Come back in spring," Lady Partridge said. "The roses will be extraordinary." "I've heard that," Cecily said. Lady Partridge gave her a look that contained approximately 15 things, none of which she put into words. Then she patted Cecily's hand and went inside. The Duke walked her to the carriage. They stood for a moment in the cold morning with the horses breathing mist and the house behind them. "Thomas," she said, "will he?" "He'll follow when you're ready for him," the Duke said. "He's been given an open offer." "Thank you." "Don't," he said, not harshly. Just the way he'd said it before in the study when she'd thanked him as though it were a transaction. She looked at him. "All right," she said, "I won't." He opened the carriage door. She put her hand on it. She thought about the carefully rehearsed versions of the last 3 weeks, about all the times she had known exactly what she was going to say and how she was going to say it, about the long, careful discipline of managing everything herself and the way that discipline had been, slowly, gently, and entirely without her permission, made to feel like less of a necessity. She looked at him. "James," she said. His expression did something she had not seen it do before. "Cecily," he said. She got into the carriage, the door closed, the carriage moved. She did not look back. That was the discipline, 4 years of it, the practiced forward-facing composure of a woman who had learned that looking back cost more than it was worth. She looked forward. She thought about spring. Spring. The roses came early that year. It was the 3rd week of April, and they were already in bud. The climbing ones on the south wall first, then the beds along the path, then the roses her mother had planted in the walled section, which had always done exactly as they pleased regardless of the season. Cecily stood at the window of the morning room with her tea and looked at them. The estate looked like itself again. That was the only way she could describe it, the way it had looked in her memory for 4 years, when she had held the picture of it like a compass point and used it to get through the gray dresses and the servants' entrances and the 8 months of careful, solitary work. It looked like the place she had grown up in. It looked like her father's house. It looked like hers. The accounts were straight. The independent trustee had been appointed in February. The court had confirmed the transfer in March, on a Tuesday morning, in a proceeding so straightforward that Mr. Carey had seemed almost disappointed by the absence of complication. Edmund had cooperated. All the way through, he had cooperated quietly, without drama, without any of the paths she had prepared for. She had written to him once in February about a matter regarding the eastern boundary, and he had replied within the week with the precise information she needed and nothing else. She had looked at his handwriting on the envelope for a long time before she opened it. She had not written again. She thought perhaps she would, eventually. She thought it would take time. She thought time was something she had now. Thomas found her at 9 o'clock with a letter on the tray. She recognized the handwriting before she picked it up. She had been recognizing it for 4 months, in letters that arrived every week without fail, always substantive, never pressing, the letters of a man who had said he would not be convenient and had meant it. Letters about the estate and the solicitor and the rose beds in the east garden, which were, he reported in February, promising. Letters about his aunt, who had developed strong opinions about the trust resolution and had communicated them at length to Mr. Carey's assistant, who had been very polite about it. Letters about a book he had found in his library that he thought she would find interesting, which he had sent separately. She had read the book. She had written back. She had been writing back, she realized, more readily with each month, less managing of what she said, less watching of how it landed, less of the careful calibration she had been practicing for 23 years, more like talking. She opened the letter. It was shorter than usual. The roses have opened. All of them, nearly at once. It has been an extraordinary week in the East Garden. Lady Partridge has claimed personal credit for this, on the grounds that she spoke encouragingly to them in February, which I cannot disprove. I find I have run out of things to say in letters. I said I would not be convenient. I meant it. I also find that I am not very good at waiting indefinitely when I know what I want and the roses are finally open. If you are ready, I would like to come. If you are not ready, I will wait. Cecily sat down. She sat in the morning room with the letter in her hands and the April light coming through the windows and the roses visible from where she sat, her mother's roses, the ones that did exactly as they pleased regardless of the season. She thought about when the estate is settled and when I'm home and the accounts are straight. The estate was settled. She was home. The accounts were straight. She thought about what she had told him. I'm not saying yes. I'm saying when. She thought about his answer. I know the difference. She thought about what it felt like to sit in a room with someone and feel no particular need to manage the silence. She put the letter down. She picked up her pen. She wrote 2 words, "Come now." She folded it, sealed it, handed it to Thomas, who took it with the expression of a man who had been waiting for this particular letter since November. "Today's post," she said. "Yes, miss," Thomas said, in a tone that suggested he intended to use the fastest horse on the estate regardless of what the post schedule said. She watched him go. She turned back to the window. The roses were extraordinary. Lady Partridge was not wrong about that, though she was certainly wrong about the reason. They were the deep, particular pink of things that had been waiting for the right season and had, when the season finally arrived, not wasted a moment of it. Cecily looked at them. She thought about the first evening in the East Garden, the note she had written, the 3 versions of the conversation she had prepared, the way she had arrived with all her rehearsed lines and had not used any of them. She thought about her hands simply at her sides. She thought about her father's letter, which she kept in her desk now in the top drawer, and which she had read enough times that she could close her eyes and hear his voice in it, the warmth of it, the directness, the love that was entirely without complication. She deserves to be known. "Yes, Papa," she said quietly, to the morning room and the April light and the roses doing exactly as they pleased. "I know, he arrived on Thursday." She heard the carriage on the drive and did not go to the window. That was the old discipline, the practiced composure, the forward-facing. She went to the window. He was looking up at the house when she looked down. He saw her. He did not wave or gesture or perform any of the things a person might perform in that moment. He simply looked at her, with the direct and uncomplicated attention of a man looking at something he had been thinking about for some time. She looked back. Then she went downstairs. She opened the front door herself, not waiting for the footman, not managing the moment, simply walking toward it with her hands at her sides and no rehearsed version of anything in her head. He was at the bottom of the steps. He looked at her the way he had looked at her from the beginning, as though she were a fact he had noted and was entirely prepared to act on. "You came," she said. "You said come now," he said. "I came now." She looked at him. She thought about not convenient, and I know the difference, and 4 months of letters that had felt more and more like a conversation between 2 people who had stopped needing to manage what they said to each other. "The roses are open," she said. "I noticed," he said, "from the drive. My mother planted them." "I know, you told me, in January." She had told him. She had not remembered telling him, but she had, in one of the letters in the middle of a paragraph about the south wall, and he had remembered. She thought about her father, who had been a man who remembered things, The small, specific things, the things that told you a person had actually been listening. She thought about the kind of man you could trust with the things that mattered. She looked at James Ashford standing at the bottom of her steps in the April morning. "Come in," she said. "I'll show you the East Garden." He came up the steps. At the door he stopped beside her and said quietly, "Cecily." She turned. He was not going to make a speech, she could see that, and was grateful for it. He was simply looking at her with everything he intended plainly visible on his face, the way he had always looked at her, from the first evening in the drawing room to now. She looked back at him. "Ask me," she said. "Are you ready?" he said. "Not for the estate or the question or any of it. Are you ready?" She stood at the door of her father's house in the April light, with the roses open on the south wall and the morning ahead of her, and no version of this she had prepared for and no need, she found, of one. "Yes," she said. He smiled, not the practiced smile of a man performing it, but the other one, the one she had only seen a few times and which she had filed away carefully and which she decided at this particular moment, finished filing away. She let herself smile back, completely, unguardedly, for once in her life not counting a single thing. She opened the door. They went in. "Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories."